DNA of a human body, we found out that there are internal clocks. We know that food has an effect at the level of our genes. Eating certain foods can bring certain good qualities, but at the same time, certain foods can increase the risk of disease. That is what is called nutrigenomics. They study the effect that certain nutrients have at activating certain parts of the DNA code. Now, we are finding out that it's not only important what you eat, but when you eat it. Timing has a big effect at the level of your genes. And this is something relatively new. We're finding out that every single one of us has internal clocks. And those internal clocks help us just as a team that has to get together and plan together so that they can execute correctly the plan. In the same way, those clocks, as they are synchronized, you meet together so you can synchronize your plans. In the same way, the internal clocks that we have naturally, just like the clocks in your home, get desynchronized. So they need to be synchronized on a regular basis for the human body to work in an optimum way. So the way that synchronization takes place in the hypothalamus of our brain, if you see the brain, the very bottom part of the brain, that's where the hypothalamus is located. In that hypothalamus, we find the central clock. So every organ in our body has clocks, and the hypothalamus needs to synchronize the multiple clocks in the body, and that's how things work efficiently. If desynchronization is taking place, it causes all kinds of disturbances in the body. So every organ needs that synchronization. And the way that things are synchronized, they happen in multiple ways. By what we're eating, but by when we're eating, and especially things like bright light. Bright light helps your eyes to pick up that bright light. As that light travels through the optic nerve, there is a nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It senses that there is light running through that nerve, and that sends a signal for synchronization. So that's why it's important for us to spend some time outside of buildings. Being inside of buildings constantly is not good for you. One of the multiple reasons why lockdowns were a terrible idea, because people were inside buildings without that bright light. You started feeling depressed and all kinds of things, secondary to the desynchronization that was taking place. So we know that many diseases, you can trace those diseases and increase the risk of developing things like obesity, diabetes, cancer, and many other diseases. And there's multiple studies. Let's go and review a few of those studies. In this study, it was showing how there are certain timing in certain functions. There's a time of the day when we feel like, taking challenges and so forth. There's other times of the day that we feel like, I'm tired. I want to just, take it easy and so forth. There's certain time of the day when you feel hungry. There's certain time of the day when you don't feel hungry and so forth, because there's this internal clocks inside the human body. So the name of the game is to learn about those clocks so that we can work with those clocks instead of working against them, because when we work against those internal clocks, the result is disease. In this other very interesting study, they were analyzing what is happening to the people that work in shifts. And if you're not familiar with this, these are people, that start 1 week in the morning, then they switch them, to the afternoon the next week, and then the next week they're going to put them in the night shift, and then they're going to switch them back again in the day. That constant change of shifts is horrible for your body. In fact, we know that people that do this type of shift, working shifts, they have increased risk of gaining weight because it affects the internal beneficial bacteria that we have in our gut by doing that, and also increased risk for diabetes. And one of the challenges is not only you're changing those cycles of brightness and darkness, but also when are you eating? One of the mistakes, especially night workers, that they do is that they don't time their meals correctly, and when they finish their night shift, what do? They go and eat this huge meal, and then they go to bed. Is that what you do every night when you go to bed? You eat a huge meal and then you go to bed. You shouldn't, isn't it? You're going to end up with nightmares and stuff like that. And the reason why is that just as when you go to bed at night, you want to have your stomach, nice and empty. So the reason why is because you have receptors for melatonin all over your digestive tract. So when there is food circulating in the evening, the receptors sense that, and the level of melatonin is decreased. So your quality of sleep suffers. Not only that, there are melatonin receptors in the back of your eye. So if there is light in the room, that causes those receptors, even though your eye is closed, you still are sensing light, and you decrease the level of melatonin affecting your sleep quality. And this is a very interesting published paper. They were trying to see what happens regarding glucose metabolism in this study. This is what is called a crossover study. So you start putting one intervention in this group and another intervention in this group, and then in the middle of the study, you switch both groups, so then you can find, is the real effect, more of a placebo type of thing, or is the actual intervention causing that? And what they did, they fed these people food with a little bit of radiation so that they could see how the food travels in the digestive tract. And this is what they found out. See, when they measure the function of the pancreas, there's a function called the disposition index. It's how well the pancreas is adapting to a certain workload. Just by doing shift work 3 days, of changing your usual routine, cause this pancreas to have a hard time catching up with its work. See, it doesn't take years and years and years. It's something that happens quite quickly. And one of the key hormones regarding body clocks is a hormone by the name of melatonin. And melatonin has all kinds of beneficial effects, from antidepressive to helping us sleep nice and deep, to our ability to handle more higher levels of pain, to our ability to help us control anxiety, blood pressure, inflammation, antioxidant. In fact, it's the most powerful antioxidant that is there. And you don't need to pay for it, you know. Every night you can generate nice amounts of melatonin. In fact, melatonin has been correlated to your risk of heart attack. Somebody that is having less amount of melatonin is at higher risk for a heart attack. And not only that, even when they do an organ transplant, the probability that that transplanted organ will last longer has to do with the levels of melatonin of the receptor. See how important this melatonin is in all kinds of processes. In fact, I have a video about it. It has 2.8 million views. This video is on my YouTube page. The bad news is that it's in Spanish. But YouTube has a function there. You can click there on that thing, and it'll translate your, the captions into whatever language that you need. And we know that somebody with a critical illness, what level of melatonin they have is actually a predictor if this person is going to get worse or is going to get better. And here is one important thing about melatonin. Most of the melatonin is secreted early in the night. As soon as sunset happens and darkness starts to come in, our levels of melatonin start to increase. But we think that we are very smart. So we have televisions, and we have computer screens, and we have cell phones that are shooting blue light. So then our brain thinks, wait a minute, it's not time to sleep, it's time to be awake. So the person gets exposed to this blue light, and then what ends up happening is that the person has a hard time sleeping, secondary that the blue light excited the day cycle. So if you are sleeping in a nice dark room, so your room needs to be as dark as possible, you're going to secrete melatonin from your retina, the back part of your eye. And if you avoid dinner, it actually starts being secreted by your intestine. What I was telling you, if there's food circulating there, you block that melatonin. And you need certain key nutrients to make that melatonin, including things like folate, vitamin B6, zinc, magnesium, vitamin B12. So these nutrients need to be present, then the body can assemble that melatonin. That's one of the reasons why it's important to eat a good, healthy, with lots of variety type of diet. And this melatonin is an essential part of the body setting in our bodies. And we know very well that you can start to stimulate certain diseases when you are disturbing the cycles of the body. That's the reason why in places that are very dark, for example, the very southern part of Australia or very southern part of New Zealand, as the amount of sunlight in the summer decreases, there's a higher likelihood of mental health problems. Because as the person is not exposed to that bright light, then the synchronization of the body clocks does not take care properly, and that can result in mental health problems. So that's why it's so important that if you're one of those persons that is struggling because of lack of light, you need to invest yourself in one of those bright lights that they sell. Those bright lights have enough intensity to stimulate those receptors in your brain. And it's very interesting. Most of the major diseases, from Alzheimer's to Parkinson's, even Huntington's and autism, have been correlated to disruption of those internal body clocks. And there's some people that say, well, doctor, my problem is that I am a night owl type of person. I need to stay late in the evening. You know, I work much better when that's happening. Well, that's not necessarily true. We know very well that disturbing your body clocks by doing that, this fascinating study of more than 500,000 people, it was documenting how those night owls are at higher risk for mental health problems. And now you know why. Because you are causing that desynchronization of those clocks. People that like to stay very late in the evening usually go to bed very late and they wake up too late in the morning. And they miss that early in the day brightness of the sun, and therefore the synchronization of their clocks doesn't take correctly that synchronization. Now, there was a fascinating study that was documented. They took those night owls and they put them in tents. They took away their electronics, and guess what? In a week, every single one of those night owls became morning people. Because what they needed was, when you're in a tent, when the sun comes up, you know it very well. It's nice and bright there in your tent. So by exposing yourself to bright light early in the morning, you cause synchronization to take place, and then your sleep cycle starts to shift earlier and earlier in the evening. That's what happened to our ancestors. The majority of our ancestors work in agriculture. And if you work in agriculture, you knew that if you waited to go in the field to work, it was going to get really hot. So our ancestors, the farmers, were out in the fields first thing in the morning. And they would get this nice bright light early in the day. They would get that synchronization of their clocks. And I'm telling you, none of them had problems with insomnia. Not only the bright light, but also the tremendous physical work that they would be doing. By the time the evening came, man, that's the last thing they wanted to do, stay up, isn't it? They wanted to hit the pillow as soon as possible. And this is very interesting how if you disturb those circadian rhythms, you start giving anxiety to mice, okay? Because there is a relationship of mental health. And this other one, how when you disturb those internal clocks, you also give depression-like symptoms to mouse, okay? So again, you can see the tremendous effect that these internal clocks have on our mental health. This is such an important subject that in the 2017 cycle of the Nobel Prize, the people studying circadian rhythms actually got the Nobel Prize, because this is, we're finding out a lot of new information that we didn't know. And this other one also. Now this one on humans, journal Lancet, one of the top journals in the world, was documenting how when you disturb your body clocks, you're more likely to end up with severe type of depression. Like yesterday, I didn't finish telling you the story. In our depression program in California, we have the key of every single one of our patients. And the reason why is that if the patient didn't sleep good, instead of letting them there be in bed the whole morning, no, we're going to knock in their door, and if they don't open, we're going to open their door. Why are we doing that? Because we need to take them outside where there is bright light so they can synchronize their clocks. That's going to help them improve their depression, and that's going to help them break that cycle of insomnia. See, when you expose yourself to bright light early in the morning, you increase the level of a chemical by the name of serotonin, which is going to make you feel good. And in the evening, the serotonin is transformed into melatonin, okay? And that's why it's so important to expose ourselves to bright light early in the morning. If you don't have time or you cannot go for a walk, at least open your windows and let that sunlight come in to help you with that synchronization of your clocks in the morning. So we know that the people that have disruption of their body clocks are more likely to have mood swings, are more likely to feel lonely, and all kinds of problems. Now, this fascinating study, it was showing that the more disease your metabolism is, you affect, by the fact that you are having issues with metabolism, you affect your body rhythms. So this is the study, fascinating study. Notice this. They were showing how people that are healthy, they're able to secrete nice and high levels of melatonin. While somebody that has diabetes, notice that they cut their level of melatonin by half. In fact, if they are diabetics that have very bad control of their glucose to the point that they even damage their nerves of their legs, notice how the level of their melatonin falls down even further down. And I have done quite a bit of studies documenting how lifestyle choices, you find all of these studies on that ResearchGate page, how things like plant-based diet help people improve those fasting glucose levels, or how blood pressure responds beautifully to the intensive lifestyle changes, and how even people that have poorly controlled diabetes, as they change the way they live, they're able to improve quite a bit their health. And this is a study, a manuscript that I'm working on. This patient came to us. He had problems with allergies, with depression, with high blood pressure, with his weight, and all kinds of troubles. And he was taking this bag of medication every day. We helped him change his lifestyle, and he was able to stop all those medications. And we did the mathematics. This patient is saving $53,850 of medication he no longer needs to take. So not only your health improves, your wallet improves as you make these positive lifestyle changes. This is another one of my papers. We were documenting how people that change their lifestyle, incorporate that plant-based diet, do their exercise, and all those good behaviors, after a matter of 18 days, 97% of them were able to stop their blood pressure medication as their bodies started healing. And we talked about this previously, this patient of ours, how he was diabetic, he was hypertensive, he had problems with obesity, and how in a matter of a year and a half, he was able to reverse every single one of those conditions. You find this one also there on my ResearchGate page. Just go to Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate, and you should be able to get those studies. So we saw that there are internal body clocks on every organ, but not only on every organ, on every cell of the body, there are internal clocks. And let me show you a little bit at the level of the genes of what is happening. Among the most important genes regarding body clocks, you have what is called the BMAL1 and the gene by the name of clock. And then you have also, when they stimulate a reverb herb. I'm going to mention a few of these, pair, and then the cry gene. So when there is stimulation of those genes, that's what ends up happening. And this is very interesting. They were studying the expression of certain genes that are involved in these internal rhythms. And this is what they found out. The clock gene is affected by when you eat and when you stop eating. So that's why you need to have a good plan. Last meal of the day needs to come 3 or 4 hours or more before you go to bed, so that your system is nice and ready for resting. And here you can see one of the most important genes related to our levels of energy is one that is called the AMP kinase. And you can see that AMP kinase is increased when you are, what does it say there? Fasting, and when you're what? Doing exercise. So this AMP kinase is what helps burn energy in your body. In other words, when you do exercise and when you do fasting, is an effective way on helping you to lose weight. So the way it works, think about this AMP kinase as a kind of sensor of energy. If the body is sensing that there is too little energy because you were fasting, what the body does, starts stimulating the burning of fat in order for you to continue having good levels of energy. So we said fasting is one of those things that stimulate this AMP kinase, but also exercise. What else does it stimulate them? Things like resveratrol. Now, the wine industry has brainwashed you to think that only wine has resveratrol, and that's not necessarily true. Any vegetable, any fruit that is nice and dark is loaded with resveratrol. So just go to the store and buy those dark type of fruits. They are loaded. Things like blackberries, things like blueberries, things like these grapes that are nice and dark, they are loaded with resveratrol. Also, nutrients, spices such as turmeric, they actually activate the AMP kinase. Also, the consumption of quercetin in things like elderberries, like red onions, cranberries, peppers, and so forth. Also ginseng, also mulberries, and just the fact that you eat fiber, it stimulates that AMP kinase. And as we mentioned, exercise is another one, and caloric restriction. Now let me talk about this. How can you do caloric restriction in the long term? Because we need to eat, isn't it? How can you do that in a long term? By switching to a full plant-based diet. When you do that switch, you are automatically decreasing the caloric density of your food. So you need to eat quite a bit to eat your usual calories. And another thing that we can do, we can establish a normal fasting eating cycle every day. This is something that is called the intermittent fasting. And this is something I've been doing personally since 1997. I only eat since then 2 times a day. So I eat, and then my body is in fasting mode until my second meal around 3:30. And then that's my last meal of the day, and not until the breakfast is my next meal. I go to run in the mornings. You know, I told you, the other day I went all the way from here, all the way to the Sydney Olympic Park. Okay? I have plenty of energy, okay? And then I eat breakfast, okay? So how you can do that? Because of the help of the AMP kinase. In fact, I have done a few studies on the subject. In this study, we were demonstrating that if you put somebody that is obese on a plant-based diet, the person is going to lose weight in a matter of 18 days. If the person is overweight, they're going to lose weight. But if the person is normal weight, they don't lose weight. And if the person is underweight, they don't lose weight, which is the beauty of this. In other words, if you have excess body weight, as you switch to the whole food plant-based diet, you'll start losing weight, and once you come down to your normal weight, you'll stabilize there. That is the beauty of this method. Now, we were talking about how diabetes was disrupting the levels of melatonin. What effect does diabetes have at the level of the genes? Well, in this study was fascinating. They were showing how, remember we mentioned this gene, this reverb A gene, this gene related to body clocks. So I want this gene as high as possible. That means the higher it goes, the more synchronization that takes place in the body. So in this study, it was shown that if somebody is obese but still is healthy, notice the nice high levels that it has regarding the activation of that gene, which is good. And if somebody has diabetes, type 2 diabetes, that's the circle in white, notice how it's lower than this one. In other words, there is less gene expression, therefore there is less body clock synchronization. One of the many reasons why, if you have diabetes, you need to start doing something to improve that diabetes, because you're having disruption at the level of your body clocks, if that's the case. So if you remember, this is the reverb herb alpha, the one we were talking about in the last slide, which has to do with the activation of the gene, the gene clocks. And this other one, very, very interesting, how that same gene is disturbed by metabolism problems. So for example, somebody that is healthy but not in shape, notice how their levels of the expression of that gene are nice and high. But somebody that is unhealthy and not in shape, notice how it's starting to go down their level of activation. And somebody that is obese, even further down. And somebody that has type 2 diabetes, even further down their level of the activation of those genes. And again, if the gene is not activating correctly, it means less synchronization is happening at the level of those synchronization genes. So can you see the importance of controlling the type 2 diabetes, and the importance, if you have issues with your weight, to work on that? And we know that using things like screens before going to bed resets those internal clocks in a negative fashion, so be aware of that. One of the things you can use, I know there's some people that because of work, they need to use computers and so forth in the evening. If that's the case, if you use Windows, there is a free program by the name of F-Lux, okay? Just go ahead and download that program. It's free, and it will give you, you tell them where in the planet you are, and it makes the calculation when sunset will take place. And as sunset is taking place, it's starting to block your blue light. In that way, you're less likely to cause desynchronization in your body. Now, also, today's cell phones, the latest versions of their operating systems have the function of you to activate your blue light filters, which help you, blocking that blue light in the evening. Another interesting study was trying to see when you eat and the effect that it has on your body clocks. And this was also a crossover trial. In other words, you start intervention on this, and then you switch in the middle of the study, the groups, so that they receive both different interventions and you're able to see the real effect on their body. And here is the result. Very fascinating. It was showing that food early in the day causes synchronization of your body clocks. And this other one also, very interesting study. What you eat and the effect on those body clocks. In this other study, they were doing a comparison between high carbohydrate foods versus high fat foods. And the conclusion was that foods that are high in fat have a negative effect on that synchronization cycle in your body. And the results were very clear. And also, what you eat and its effect on those genes that cause synchronization or desynchronization. And here's a nice summary. If you're eating the typical Western diet, full of animal products and fats and refined foods, notice how there is minimum effect on the positive genes that cause synchronization. Compare to a Mediterranean type of diet, high in legumes, your beans, lentils, garbanzos, and so forth, high in fruits and vegetables, high in high fiber foods. Notice that when you eat that type of diet, you activate a wide variety of genes that help with the synchronization of your body clocks. And this other study, fascinating. This study was done by Muslims. And they were trying to see what effect does eating at different times have on your body clocks. In fact, I experienced this when I went to Kuwait during the Ramadan, okay? And during the Ramadan, these people eat a lot in the evening. As soon as the sunset happens, they're eating. In fact, because they're not going to eat during the day, they wake up at 2, 3 in the middle of the night to eat a huge meal because, they're not going to be able to eat during the day. And this is their study. This study was done by Muslims. Look at what they did. So just so you can understand the results, Ramadan is actually the name of one of their months. The whole month is called Ramadan. And the month before Ramadan is Shaban, okay? And look at what they found out when they did this study. During the Ramadan, notice how they cause tremendous disruption of those body clocks. And now you know why. Because here you're eating exactly at the time that you shouldn't be eating. As I mentioned to you, eating too late is not good for your body clocks. So eating that late and then also waking up super early in the morning to eat, that causes disruption of their body clocks, to the synchronization of their body clocks doesn't take place. No wonder why, I visited many of these Arab countries during Ramadan. People are even a little bit, in bad mood and so forth, during that whole month, It could be secondary to that disruption. It doesn't make you feel good when you're disturbing your body clocks. And this other one, talking about caloric restriction and body clocks. And it was found out that when you are doing fasting, if you're doing fasting completely, your body clocks activate much better, what I was telling you. Because if your last meal is early in the day, then you're in that fasting mode by the time you go to bed, and that helps activate your body clocks. And the study was very clear. The people that were doing the fasting type of effect, their activation of the gene was nice and good. So it is better to eat at certain times than it is better to not eat at another times. So I can get both good things from both worlds by eating a plant-based diet. In that way, I'm eating, this caloric restrictive type of diet, and then the fasting. And in closing, intermittent fasting and type 2 diabetes. It was documented how that intermittent fasting is excellent to lose weight and to improve type 2 diabetes. In fact, I even have a relative of mine. My relative had a big problem with her weight. And just by switching to an intermittent fasting type of program, her diet actually didn't improve very much, but just by switching her meals and having, that period of fasting and so forth, she was able to lose all that weight. Secondary to put in order in her meals and so forth. So in closing, as you can see, the circadian rhythms are affected by the choices that we are making in our lifestyle, and that has an effect at the level of the germs that live in our intestines. That has an effect on our metabolism, and that's going to have either a positive or a negative effect at disease risk. So as you can see, all these things are connected. And I close with this very fascinating counsel. At least 5 or 6 hours should intervene between the meals, and most people who give the plan a trial will find that 2 meals a day are better than 3. Lots of wisdom here, as you switch into that intermittent fasting mode, you are gonna get the best out of both worlds. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.